Hello, people. I hope you're all well. Okay, so as you know, pretty much all my recent videos have been about Ukraine. Um, that reflects my own thoughts because it's been very much on my mind, but also it's been the main news issue here in the UK, and I suspect for much of Europe and the West past fortnight. Um, so I'm going to talk about something a bit different now. No doubt Ukraine will come up in other videos, but for now I want to talk about something that actually one of my subscribers asked me about. Apologies, I can't remember who it was, but I want to talk about the protests in Canada that have been going on for some time now. As far as I know, they're still ongoing. I'm talking about the lorry convoys. Um, so what I'm going to do is I came across an article. It was a leader article in the Economist magazine. Um, well, I say magazine, they market themselves as a newspaper, but it's more in a magazine style in terms of its layout, in terms of its the type of material that's used and so on. This is from a few weeks ago, but I thought it was very well written. So I'm just going to read it out because I pretty much agree with it. I might add a few thoughts afterwards. The journalist isn't named because the Economist doesn't do that. They don't name the journalist for individual articles. But basically, it's from the February the 19th to the 25th weekly edition. There we can see Vlad with, you can see that. Putin's big mistake, Putin's botched job, rather. This is before the full scale invasion. But anyway, that's the edition that this article's from. So, no copyright infringement intended. This is entirely quoted from The Economist. And I'll just go ahead. Free speech. No Canada. That's obviously a play on Oh Canada. Justin Trudeau has handled vaccine protests atrociously. Canada's reputation for impeccable politeness is taking a knocking. In recent weeks, crowds of lorry drivers and other Canadians protesting against COVID-19 restrictions have blocked public highways and camped outside Parliament in Ottawa. Many with placards reading "Fuck Trudeau," this is verbatim, referring to the youthful Prime Minister, though the expletive often appears with a maple leaf as an asterisk. Nastier messages have cropped up too. One or two protesters carried in flags emblazoned with swastikas, perhaps to suggest absurdly that Canada's COVID restrictions are akin to Nazism. The Freedom Convoy, as hundreds of lorry drivers call themselves, was sparked by the introduction of a COVID vaccine mandate in January. This requires all truckers who enter Canada from the United States, as thousands of Canadian drivers do every day, to either be jabbed or to endure a 2 week quarantine. Although most Canadians think such rules are reasonable, the protesters have struck a chord with some. A vocal minority are fed up with burdensome pandemic restrictions. Many of the young who have suffered job losses because of lockdowns designed to protect their elders are especially grumpy. The truckers have received both verbal and monetary support from abroad. Donald Trump, Fox News, and a cacophony of populists praise them. Well wishers have crowdfunded the cause. Faced with this ruckus, Canada's government should have drawn a clear distinction between harmful acts and obnoxious or foolish words. Peaceful protests are fine, blocking crucial highways so that others cannot go about their business is not. Some of the truckers shut down a bridge over which 25% of Canada's goods trade with the United States passes. The police took 6 days to remove them. Given that the protest blocked an estimated $350 million of trade each day, this was needlessly slow. The truckers are wrong about the vaccine mandate at the border. Such rules are a reasonable precaution to slow the spread of a deadly and highly infectious disease. Canada's government is right to enforce them. But the truckers have every right to express their disagreement. A wise government would listen to them and respond politely, taking their complaint seriously and patiently explaining why COVID restrictions, though onerous, are necessary for the time being. Justin Trudeau has done the opposite. First, he refused to meet them, Then, seizing on the fact that a few of the protesters appeared to be bigots, he attempted to put all of them outside the boundaries of reasonable debate, condemning that anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-black racism, homophobia, and transphobia that we've seen on display in Ottawa over the past number of days. This is a quote from Trudeau. That's a disgraceful statement. Um, the police already have ample powers to quell disorder, yet on February the 14th, Mr. Trudeau invoked emergency powers under a 34-year-old law that had never been used before. It would allow the government to declare protests illegal and freeze the bank accounts of protesters without court order. Meanwhile, his Liberal government is mulling two worrying changes to Canada's already illiberal hate speech laws. One would allow Canada's Human Rights Tribunal to impose large fines on those it deems to have used hateful language. It has in the past taken an expansive view of what counts as hateful, and defendants would enjoy fewer safeguards than they do under criminal law. The other proposed change would let individuals file legal complaints against people preemptively if they fear that they may be about to say something hateful. This is actually quite worrying. These are both terrible ideas. The Economist has long argued that free speech should be restricted only under exceptional circumstances, such as when the speaker intends to incite physical violence. Canada's laws are already more restrictive than this, and the country's illiberal left would like them to be still more so. Academics have been suspended or disciplined for writing that Canada is not racist, or for holding gender critical views. The proposed amendments would give liberal activists legal tools to harass conservative religious folk, traditional feminists, and many more besides, simply for holding views that the left finds offensive. Worse, it would allow some to be gagged before they speak. Canada is not yet a rancorous or bitterly divided society. If Mr. Trudeau wants to keep it that way, he should stop trying to police Canadian thoughts. I wasn't aware of that. Now, that use of Canada's Human Rights Tribunal is disturbing. It's Orwellian. And we're not totally alien from it in this country. Various hate speech legislation in Britain, ostensibly designed to protect minorities, have been accused of effectively being blasphemy laws. It might be hyperbole, but I think there is a lot of grey lines when you start talking about speech. Um, like I said, there's no journalist quote there. The Economist doesn't do that. That isn't the main article, I should say. It's just the leader. But I pretty much agree with that. The Economist is a generally respected publication. It tends to be quite centre ground, from what I gather. They tend to think in real politics as opposed to ideologically. Um, and I think that's quite a balanced write up. Now, I should add a caveat. I have not followed this story very closely, but I know it's a big, big issue in Canada, and probably the most significant protest or uh, well, let's call it protest, seen in Canada for some time. So it's a big story there, and actually it has big stories across the border as well. Let me just say that the likes of Donald Trump and Fox News jumping on the bandwagon, they should mind their own business. I think that for Donald Trump to be telling the Canadian government what to do in its own country, that's I really don't give much credence to the likes of Donald Trump and Fox News. And I would also be cautious. My question would be, if I were a Canadian, what sort of disruption are the protests causing? Now, in the UK, we've had Insulate Britain protests that have absolutely infuriated the public, and the vast majority are against them because their tactics are incredibly disruptive. Now, if I was in Ottawa and the truckers were holding up traffic and I was trying to get to work or trying to get a child to hospital or something like that, I can't imagine I would be overly sympathetic to them. So, what I always say with any protest is you have to be very careful not to polarize the public. If your tactics cause significant disruption, you're going to turn the public against you. And the polls that I've seen, most Canadians are not backing the truckers. But that could change. Um, Certainly, Trudeau's language is disgraceful. Demonizing them as Islamophobic and all the rest of it. It may be that there are some pockets among them who veer to the far right, but I think it's probably a minority. I think most of them just don't like bureaucracy and the imposition of this. Um, and they have free speech, they have a right to dissent. This is something that Justin Trudeau needs to understand. I think that he's sort of being complacent because he's won re-election, so he has another parliamentary term. Um, this is just sort of symbolic of the sheer hypocrisy of the regressive left. That they claim to be the sole arbiters of liberalism and human rights. The great irony of what's happening in Canada right now is what's supposed to be held up as liberal. I mean, I'm thinking of this human rights tribunal. It does sound similar to some of the problems we've had in the UK. To actually use a so-called human rights tribunal to trample free speech is such a paradox. It's ridiculous. And Canada's a great country. It's probably one of the best countries in the world to live, to express dissent. Um, but I think I've always said this, or at least I've been saying it for a while now, that we can't be complacent about freedom in liberal democracies. And I think the Canadian leftism are among the most obnoxious of all from what I've seen. They're very intolerant, and they have this obsessive fixation on pluralism, except when it comes to pluralism of opinion. Um, I mean, they almost make British and American wokes look moderate the way they go on. Having said that, I don't quite agree with those on the right who are sort of martyrizing the truckers because if they're spreading conspiracy theories about COVID, that's reckless. If they're causing disruption, that's selfish. So I wouldn't agree with some right wing or conservative commentators that they're totally martyrs of freedom. And it is disingenuous to say that most Canadians support them. I don't think that's true. Um, However, that could turn if you have guys that are simply saying I don't agree with these mandates and then they're being smeared as far right, that will turn against Trudeau. And I think it's a disgrace and totally unstatesmanlike that he is resorting to such smears. What he should do is say, I understand the frustrations, but this is why we're doing it. Rather than polarizing them, if they break the law, by all means, then there should be action taken against them. But I've heard there has been police brutality. I've heard that there has been an overreach of this. Um, I'm not there. I can't say I know what it's like on the ground. But I more or less agree with that write up. I'd like to hear from Canadians. Are you sympathetic to them? If so, why? If not, why? Do you think Trudeau's right, or do you think Trudeau is being polarizing with his language? Um, I think it's. I mean, Emmanuel Macron said similar things in France. He said that he wanted to provoke the anti-vaxxers and so on. Um, Let me just be clear. I've little time for those people. I think it's reckless and selfish to promote anti-vaccine conspiracy theories. Um, but I also think governments need to be careful not to martyrize them by overreach. I think if they are engaging in threats as some anti-vaxxers have. They've barged into hospitals and really behaved in a disgraceful way. But from what I can tell, these truckers haven't been violent. Disruptive maybe, but so far not violent. So I think Trudeau, well, he's dug himself in now, hasn't he? Because he's already said these things. What he should do is say, I was wrong to say that and I apologize. Um, but, he's probably going to double down. But I really think Canada needs to be very careful because I do see complacency. I mean, Canada is meant to be a great beacon for freedom of speech and democracy and pluralism, but it seems this obsession with pleasing everyone all the time or um, political correctness, really, um, is coming at a cost. I mean, this issue about punishing academics who say that Canada is not a racist country, assuming there's not more to it, and they're simply saying you can't just smear a country like that. I think that's a disgrace and is very concerning. So anyway, I want to know Canadian perspectives. That's pretty much my take. I more or less agree with their write up on it. I probably wouldn't entirely agree with the truckers, but they have a right to express dissent and they have a right to peacefully protest. They don't have a right to disrupt the public unnecessarily or hold the Canadian economy to ransom. I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think they have a right to do that. But Trudeau needs to be more sympathetic to their concerns. Let me know your thoughts.